Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And first of all, it is the holiday seasons. In the next 2 weeks we will have Christmas and then New Year. So I want to start with wishing you all a very fun time during the holidays. I'll be spending some time with my family and then I'll try to make a little bit of time for some more EVE Online videos because I still need to prepare some, of course. Next up, when it comes to EVE Online, there are, I think, 3 major points that I noticed in the last week. The first one, maybe not really immediately something that's going to impact the market, but I think it's pretty cool. It is, of course, that the devs can now play the game even if they are recognized. They don't have to then go back into hiding. That means that you might see devs in chat channels, you might encounter devs in your big alliances, perhaps just roaming around, flying around. At some point I think we will start to get to know at least some of the characters that devs fly, if they're willing to come forward, of course, and provide that information. It's basically now something that they get to choose, and it would be very cool, of course, to someday see a dev fly around in detail, say hi to him. Yeah, always feels a little bit like a rockstar moment when you actually encounter a dev or a GM or someone in a Polaris frigate or something like that. So I personally am all for it. Of course, we have to be a little careful when it comes to bias and things like that, but I'm pretty convinced that CCP has it handled. They have had a scandal before I started playing EVE with devs showing favoritism, but at this point I think that basically the company has grown a lot. EVE is so old, and I think everyone is well aware that the integrity of the game is basically paramount to keeping it healthy for the longer term. 2 other things that I noticed, of course, we get yet another plex sale. It's only 10% off, but I think it will have an impact on the market. And then, of course, the biggest thing, CCP actually starting with redistribution of resources in the game. That's actually pretty damn major, of course. Happened in a Chaos era style, where basically nullsec miners noticed that all their rucks were a lot smaller all of a sudden, but it looks like CCP has a plan at this point for the resource redistribution. I'm not sure if that means that they're gonna like implement a dynamic system, but they're talking about in the upcoming weeks and months definitely big changes. And the first one that we know now is, of course, that the anomalies have been pretty much halved or even less than halved in 0.0, and that they took Veldspar and Spoddomain, I think, out of the belts in 0.0. Personally, yeah, I kind of like that move, trying to make something that is very easy and attainable, but also can be mined at a much lower rate in high sec. Try to give that some value, at least for the lowest end minerals in the game. So as always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store. Let's see what's happening over here. So we still have the Yaul Star skin front and center, and so I was mistaken. Let's maybe open up the Ishtar one just to take a look at it. And so now you can see the animation. This bar actually does fill up, and when it will be completely filled up, you'll have the extra light effect in front of the ship. I thought, because I didn't see any progress, and I still don't see it in the preview of the bar, or of the skin, although it's maybe this part here. So it's really an animation that is going to go over several days and keep changing. Pretty cool concept. Nice to see how the skin technology is actually still being developed and continuously changing in EVE Online. Any sales or anything like that? No. Oh man, on the Nyx it's gotta look really cool, I think. And then down here we're going back to that Zento Isideko skin for Caldari ships. Pretty unique looking. I prefer those that have some black highlights, but 55 plex, that doesn't seem unreasonable in price either. But yeah, no sales here. That means that we get to move on to the market, and as always we'll start with some plex and stuff. That's gonna be at 440. Like that. Plex and stuff. Let's open up that plex chart, first of all, you can see that we are diving down even further. We are breaking the only price range that was defended for the whole year, pretty much, except for a couple of days here, 3.25 million. We just have broken through that with the 5-day moving average, so we are at a 1-year low point for Plex. Here you can see the previous sale. I think this was like a 15% sale with the volumes. There's another 10% sale going. Volumes not that high, but the impact on the price is there, so that is very interesting. Definitely some hesitation. The market is, I think, trying to time the bottom here, and we've got 3.2 million for the sellers in Cheetah, just below 3.2 million for the buyers. That's pretty important. The margin is basically gone, but the margins have not budged. So there's a lot of competition to try and buy Plex at this range, and I think they're right. If you look at this chart, it makes a lot of sense, of course, to buy at or as close as possible to 1-year low point. And this is the holidays. CCP is coming out with extra gifts with all of these Plex sales, and then just 4 months from now, 4 months from now, we have EVE FanFest to look forward to. So the potential is definitely there in the Plex market. If we go to the player-owned trade hubs, actually riding competition with Jita, 3.27 million for most of those, so it's basically between 3.3 and 3.15 million. Very narrow margin all of a sudden because of that extra sale. And so this is really, if you need or want to make a Plex investment, this does look like the right time to move in. We've had that 3.25 million potential here in August, in September, and again in December, but now even the 5-day moving average to 1-year low point, I think that's very telling. And of course, you know, 2 sales in Plex in very short order, one after another, creating this situation. It could be a very huge opportunity. Of course, you can never tell the future, so don't put all your risk in that basket. Always make sure to diversify enough as well. After that, we have the multiple pilot train certificate, I think, that I always look at. That one is also going back down a little bit. I'm not sure if there's a sale of this one going on, but it could just be pressure from the Plex market that shows through in other items as well. So this one is now selling for 1.6 billion, still just below that. Buyers are just above 1.4 billion. That's actually a decent margin between the two. So here I would not be surprised if that's basically the buyers going down in price a little bit more, expecting to be able to pick up some cheaper pilot certificates because of the current Plex price, of course. After that, we'll take a look at the skill extractor. These, as always, mirror Plex prices very closely, and we can see the same thing here, the 5-day moving average breaking through the 380 barrier, which did so about a year ago as well. So if this is any indication, right, look at that April spike here as well, which could be a FanFest related spike. This looks really juicy, of course. Will we see an exact repeat of this upswing wave here from 380 million to 500 million for the skill extractors? That's difficult to know, but the potential again is definitely there. Skill extractors are currently selling for 383 million. Buyers are down to 356 million. That's definitely a nuance here. Let's maybe go for the player on trade hubs. Actually, it's up to 365 million. That's a bit more reasonable, but there's like a slightly bigger margin percentage wise, I feel, for the skill extractors all of a sudden, which means that here I would definitely try a buy order, like let's say below 370, to try and grab some of these as an investment. That makes more sense than to go for the sellers on Plex. Let's take a look at that here. 3.17 million to 3.2 million. Well, I wouldn't hesitate, if you want that investment, to just go straight for that 3.2 million right here. I think they are also getting picked up pretty quickly, as expected. That margin just doesn't make it worth it to go and risk a not filled market order at this point anymore. So after that, we've got the hypercores. I think maybe we'll leave those for last. Let's move on to the injectors. So here are the large scale injectors that finally succumbed to the pressure as well. Had a very nice uptick from 800 to 900 million ISK. 1/8 the price increase in about a month is definitely not bad, but now I'm suspecting under the pressure of all the gifts, of course, 14 days of gifts coming in, including from time to time, it's not really uniform, from time to time extra skill points. Same thing with the chilling spree now. There's definitely ways to get skill points there as well, although the Gnostic filaments are a big focus there. And then now we also have another plex sale, so overall this should mean pressure on the large skill injectors, and we're seeing that in the chart down to 850 million ISK on average, 886 still for the sellers, 825 for the buyers. Look at that contrast with plex and even the skill extractors. This is a very large margin between sellers and buyers, and it only goes down to 800. Only 886 to 860 for the sellers in the player-owned trade hubs. What a very wide swing between the two, and that is of course because plex are at a 1-year low point on the chart, and here the large skill injector is basically recovering from an increase of more than 10% in about a month, and here the market doesn't really know what to do. There's pulling on all sides. You get investors that definitely want those large skill injectors. I would agree with that. It's, I think, a great investment that protects you against inflation, because plex and skill extractors are a part of that item, but also gives you that that edge potentially in case of more demand for skill points all of a sudden. And there's lots of things that could happen in the game to make that happen. A rebalancing of some ships, introduction of new ships, new skills, all of that could definitely have a major impact on your investments in large skill injectors. And then on the other hand, they're seeing all those sales, they're seeing the margins for the creation of these large skill injectors go up so much that the buyers are going down in price. So it's a bit all over the place in Jita. Very aggressive sellers trying to get almost 890 million ISK out of this in a player-owned trade hubs. They're taking full advantage of the tax difference, 860 million for the sellers, and then the buyers are way down there, close to 800 million at 825. That's a massive margin between all of these parts of the large skill injector market. That should be rife with opportunity, but of course we're right in the middle of the highs and then this low point. So it's a normal market dynamic, and it's up to you to decide where do you stand in this market situation. For the small skill injectors, we also go back down after having a similar increase. Low point was at 160 million, went up to 190. Definitely a very nice increase for about a month as well. And here we see that same pressure. And then if we go for the sellers in Jita, 187 million, still trying to get almost 190 out of that. Sellers in the trade hubs, 178 to 179, and the buyers are down to 169 million. You see that exact same thing, of course. The daily alpha injectors then are probably a bit different, because they were already at a 1-year low point. There should be some sales, in my opinion, considering the volumes here are keeping the prices down. So you've had 1.5 months basically to invest in these. Probably around 35 million ISK should have been possible. It's still possible. Buyers 35.5 million. Sellers are just below 40 million ISK. This is definitely below the chart, close to 1-year low points. But it's a different thing from the large scale injectors, for instance, because it is tied to the alpha economy, which of course is quite a bit smaller potentially than the full EVE Online market. And then finally we have the hypercores. They are continuing to go down in value at the moment, probably tied to the plex downturn at the moment here as well. Started at 380 million on the chart, and now we are down to 340. So this is not that big of a swing. The market basically found the value pretty quickly. 328 million in the trade hubs, 350 in the Cheetah station, 320 million for the buy. So there's definitely a thousand, excuse me. I know it would be great to be able to sell hypercores for 328 million ISK, but it's 328,000 ISK a piece here. But there's definitely a very strong demand for this still at 320,000 as well. So there is a value set by the market. A bit of speculation on top of that, but it's probably never going to be that much. Might also be a little bit of a downtrend when CCP decides to come out and gift some of these hypercores. I think there's always going to be like a little controversy when they do that. So I don't think it'll happen that often personally. Next up, we can move on to the mineral market, coming in at 1440. And here, of course, I think speculation on that resource redistribution is going to be major. We know now that CCP has decided to take Veldspar out of nullsec anomalies, Spoddomain as well, and cut the sizes of the no, not the anomalies, but in the belts. Veldspar and Spoddomain gone from the belts or reduced significantly from the belts, and then the anomalies are reduced significantly in size as well. Let's start here with Tritanium. Should have a direct impact on that. Of course, not super visible on the chart just yet, but if we go to sellers and buyers, we are talking 587 to 6 ISK almost for most sellers. One tiny one at 540 can be considered a statistical anomaly. The buyers though are still at 520. They have patience, they're willing to wait and see what happens when it comes to Tritanium at the moment, but we clearly see that impact of all of these announcements, not even visible on the charts just yet, but the sellers are going up to 6 ISK all of a sudden. I think it has to be that news. I'm really curious to see what CCP is going to decide to do here. What I find interesting is that Tritanium, Pyrite, right, usually stuff that new players come into contact with very early, try and keep that value a little bit by giving really the big sources of those to HiSec, where they can only yield at a lower range. But if nullsec needs a lot of that, that means that there should be some added value to mining Tritanium, which is of course going to be great for new players and for HiSec care bears like myself. On the other hand, I find this timing very, it's probably a big coincidence, but this is very interesting as well. One of you guys asked me to look at the compressed ores because, it was depressed so much in value. And yeah, basically making nullsec super reliable on its own, without needing to import lots of stuff, does mean that stuff like compression becomes almost worthless. And this is another complete reversal. We have to be honest here, CCP doesn't always know exactly what he wants to do. Complete reversal in philosophy if you're going to take minerals out of regions and even out of spaces, which this first removal of Veldspar from 00 belts does indicate to, then you are of course going to put more emphasis on needing to import and export stuff. That is going to make for awesome market dynamics, but it's also probably going to re-increase the value of compression. I really don't think it has anything to do with last week's EVE talk and the suggestion from that player, but I think that basically this was on the radar for CCP for a very long time. But it's a very funny coincidence, like about a week after, or is it 2 weeks? Let me take a quick look here. Yeah, 2 weeks after we make an EVE talk talking about how the value of compression has gone down substantially, CCP comes out with the resource redistribution EVE Online that they're starting in the upcoming weeks and months, which at the first sign of it is going to re-increase the value of compression. So pretty damn cool, nice coincidence. Next up we have Pyrite, which last week was actually up as well, already at the 5 ISK, and it's able to defend this price range. That's actually pretty impressive considering this is close to a 1-year high point. Pyrite is even selling for 520 at this point, and buyers 477. They are still in that wait and see pattern. I'm sure that they're actually right. There's bound to be massive stocks of minerals still around there. For me personally, I've always waited for better times. I haven't sold minerals in a very long time at the moment. Anything that I make, I just hoard it. It's ready to go on better prices. Mostly I was looking forward to like a nullsec war, a big nullsec war. Supers being lost, they need to replace that. That's when we usually see sudden swings in the mineral prices where you can take advantage of that. But yeah, this redistribution sounds like it could be very profitable for me as well. Next up we have the Mexilon market, and here we do see that I think that impact on the need for imports very noticeably. So my theory, I think it still holds. With the nullsec blackout, nullsec felt like they needed to do something in order to still try to mine, make it safe, so they went all out on moon mining so that they could decide on their own mix quite a lot more. That's basically a side effect of getting people out of anomalies and into moon mining, so that at least there is a structure right there to help you with the defense of your mining fleet. And that meant that they could focus on more Mexilon, more Noxium, the stuff that they missed in their 0.0 local production. That crashed the price. You can see that it started here July, August, September, down to 1 year low points for Mexilon, for instance. And here we have this nice recovery all of a sudden. That was already starting in a couple of weeks, but I think that we will see a bit of a jump up here as well. So these high points are 46 ISK, and now we are selling for 47.50. So that trend is definitely continuing at this point. And here I think what's very important, buyers are already up to 44.5 as well. They are pushing this market up, expecting the bottlenecks to show back up, and then it makes a lot of sense to think that perhaps Mexilon is going to be the first one, of course, to be felt by nullsec, to need more of that. And so we have a nice little recovery towards 45 towards 50 ISK at this point. Still not a great price, but definitely a nice recovery. We still have Isogen after that. Yep, that's correct. Ooh, and here we've got a bit of speculation, and I actually agree with that as well. You can see that Isogen went to 1 year low point of 12.5, while stuff like Pyrite and Tritanium are trying to recover even without that redistribution news. Now we have a jump up to 15, and right now sellers are up to 17 ISK for Isogen. Buyers are up to 14.44 as well. This is definitely a switch in the thinking on the market, and my personal belief here is that this is speculation on CCP just changing the Isogen market itself as well. You make less Isogen normally per cubic meters than you do Mexilon, but it's worth about 1/4 of it. If there's one mineral that needs CCP's help, that perhaps needs to be used more in BPCs or made less available, it's definitely Isogen, the biggest loser of all of the previous changes to resources in EVE Online. And this is an understandable speculation. If there's one mineral that CCP might look at and say, we really need to do something for this one, it would be Isogen, and so then you want your reserves for that. So I'm seeing a little bit of speculation on CCP actually intervening in that sense. After that we have Noxium, basically stopping the descent here, not really a big sign of recovery. We went to a low point of, let's see if I can find that, around 210 ISK. We ended up at 333. Right now sellers are at 233, excuse me, 234, so not a big move here. 217 for the buyers. Yeah, it's not uniform, of course, but a little bit of a recovery here away from the low point. I would say that that's still good news. And then we have our former nullsec minerals. Here is the Zydrine chart. I don't think we expect a big impact here, because what is still going to dominate the Zydrine megasite market is the fact that you can mine these from HiSec. So there's not even a need to have like an import from nullsec or anything like that for that anymore, and I don't think CSP is going to change that, although it is possible. This still feels a little bit like a chaos era way of doing things, so this could be very interesting, but very speculative as well on Zydrine and Megasite in my opinion. So Zydrine is holding on to 485 ISK for the sellers, 461 for the buyers, not that bad, pretty flat for the week. And then Megasite is actually recovering now from the 1 year low point that it went to, so here there might be a little bit of an impact on the expected redistribution, but I think that it's mostly just recovering some investments. You can see the volumes went up about a week ago as well. People taking their positions here. 389 for the sellers, 348 for the buyers. This stuff used to be worth like 1200 ISK and more, so what a change, of course, but I don't think that the redistribution is going to impact Megasite and Zydrine that much, now that it's basically coming so much from moon mining. And then finally we have a Morphite, and that one is doing a super nice recovery from 10,000 ISK. We went there for just about a day. Anything below that I think as historically speaking been investment worthy. Here we had a very unusual situation where we went to 7,500 for a very long time, but Morphite is now selling for 13,000 ISK. That's like almost double the price from 6 months ago. Buyers at 11,700. Yeah, the strongest mineral, but also a unique one. It is not tied to the Tech 1 ship production, but to the Tech 2 ship production, of course. Moving on to PI, coming in at 24.40. Here I don't expect any real changes. It would be very speculative here to say that perhaps CCP is going to also take a look at PI with the resource redistribution and for instance like limit certain goods in certain areas. I personally don't really expect it, so I think we're gonna have more of the same. Broadcast notes here recovered a little bit to a slightly above average price of just above 2 million, so the volatility is completely gone from this market at this point. Bit of pressure at the tail end, above 2 million for the sellers, 1.9 million for the buyers. It's basically the new normal here, which would be slightly below average for the year generally speaking. Construction blocks still slowly trying to recover. We get some data points at 11,000 disc, which I would put at the average. We're still below that, of course, on our average prices. Almost 11,000 for the sellers, but 9,600 for the buyers. That's a wide margin there, and so the average prices are still below our averages here as expected. Consumer electronics try to recover as well, and look at that, it's just to no avail. More supply comes in and we played with that 10,000 disc low point again. 11.6 for the sellers but 10,300 for the buyers. It shows it's really the buyers that are not there for PI in general, causing less than average prices. Very difficult to sell at good prices here. There are exceptions. Coolants, for instance, tied to fuels, is doing quite okay. Back above 12,500 disc, yeah, 13,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. It's always a wide margin, but here it looks like the sellers are able to command a bit of a premium, and so as a result we get a very good price for coolants. Cryoprotectant solutions tied to the new implant production is finally recovering from a high point of 180,000 disc back down to 126. Buyers are down to 92,000. Here I think that basically production has started to ramp up and to be able to fill all of that demand. The big price jump has been noticed, and now people that wanted to make a move on that by just trying to get their production cycles up have done so. I think we'll be back down to that 130, 125 range, and that will stay there for the foreseeable future. But it's something to look into, because of course SCP will come out with more, or is likely to come out with more triglavian ships and probably also more triglavian implants. So we could see big spurts of upswings in these cryoprotectant solutions. When that happens, that does mean that I'm gonna keep it on the roster. Enriched uranium next, well below average, below 13,000 here at 12.8 for the sellers, 11,300 for the buyers. Again showing 11.3 for the buyers, that's down here, clearly showing that lack of demand. Integrity response drones continuing to languish below the 2.3 million as well. We're talking 2.3 million for the sellers, that's around average, but the buyers at 2.2, that's not that much of a margin anymore. So nice bit of recovery in the last couple of days, I guess, but it's only to the average range. Mechanical parts continuing to struggle a bit as well. Some data points at 11,000, which is not that bad. So sellers 11,400, but buyers 10,100. That is again a pretty wide margin. Organic mortar applicators, are we below a million again? 1.5 million almost for the sellers, but less than 1 million for the buyers. Still below average for the year. Robotics also struggling, right, just above 90,000 disc. Not that much to say on that. Hypersnap self-harmonizing power cores, 2 million. You could clearly see that as the average. Might even be a bit above that. We're talking just below 2 million for the sellers and just above 1.9 million for the buyers. So very narrow margins these days in the advanced PI materials, but all of them are trading at below average ranges. Superconductors down to 10k as well, clearly below average here. Almost 11,000 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers. Then we get test cultures, the one exception yet again. And just like in the minerals, we have of course our morphite, that's the exception here. We've got test cultures that had a very difficult year up until the summer here, where we had a bottom at 6,250, and now look at that recovery, amazing. 13,400 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers. So There's always things like that can happen, but I must say that we see that same pattern both here in Morphyte. For a very long time, Morphyte was at 7,500 ISK, and you could always ask yourself, well, is this just a new normal? Is it really worth it to keep investing in Morphyte? Turns out it was, and it's the exact same thing in the test culture market. For a very long time it kept going down. 10,000, 9,000, 7,500. Should we be buying here? Nope. 6,500, 6,250. We keep going down. We stay there then for 1, 2, 3, almost 4 months, when finally some speculation comes back, and then look at the return here all of a sudden, another 5 months later, and we have more than doubled the price of test cultures. Amazing to see how these markets were completely unexpected. I never actually jumped on that one, if I'm not mistaken, or I may have some old... Do I have any test cultures? No, I don't even have any test cultures. Yeah, I was too risk averse. Sometimes when something looks like it's never gonna recover, that's exactly the time that you should be investing in it. And then finally for PI, we've got the wetware mainframes that are staying below 2.1 million on its average, 2.16 for the sellers, but below 2.1 million for the buyers. So it's still a buyer's market with these low margins here for these advanced PI materials. Very interesting. We're not seeing the speculation and the massive oversupply downtrends needed to say, all right, this is 1 year low point, let's all invest in this. It's going to be a big return in that case when CCP comes out, or if CCP comes out with another structure. But we're basically in a low demand situation with below average prices. After that, advanced moon materials coming in at 31.35. Here, let's take a look at that. Resource distribution, again, potentially this could get hit, but it does mean, well, it's more likely, I would say, than PI. So crystalline carbonate, nice recovery up to 160, has to give back a little bit of ground, but 153 is still okay, 143 is still okay as well, staying at an average range at the moment. Ferrite carbide, oh, nice recovery here. All of a sudden went to a low point of 125 and is basically back to an above average price. 158 for the sellers, 148 for the buyers. Not bad. Very fast increase in price here, so I do think we'll lose ground again, just like here, in a pretty short order. But this is trade worthy. Buy for 120 and now you try to sell as close to 158 as possible. Definitely profit to be taken in ferrite carbide here all of a sudden. Unexpected, but definitely welcome. Titanium carbide is continuing to stay pretty low. The buyers are at 177, so you can't buy at a 1 year low point anymore, but we don't see the recovery here. And then tungsten carbide, same thing, not at that low point, 155, 158. Now buyers are up to 181, so a bit of a recovery here. Some interesting moves here all of a sudden in ferrite carbide, but most of them are staying below average. After that we have, well, half of them I should say. Photonic metamaterials, that one is going down to 1 year low point at 15,000. So if you want to speculate, 14,100 for the buyers. This looks like an interesting time to try and grab some photonic metamaterials. Plasmonic metamaterials went to that 1 year low point and has already bounced back to almost 20,000 ISK. So there is some volatility here for some reason, despite the fact that I'm not seeing the big conflicts in Nelsig that should create this. So I think it's more market forces. This is still dependent quite a bit on imports, so it's definitely possible that there's like some market manipulation happening here as well. Non-linear metamaterials are at a 1 year low point. Buyers are at 19,000 ISK. Just if you want to speculate on the potential of something like this to happen, then these photonic and the non-linear look to be in the right spot to pick them up. And then terahertz metamaterial, that's very interesting. Most of the charts, first 8, 9, maybe even 10 months, we were at around 25,000 on average, and the volatility was between 22,500 and 27,500, very limited. And then we dived down to 1 year low point of 19,000 discs. We recover almost to 25k. That's a trade where you can take profits. But then, of course, if you start to buy here, you're on the losing side. We're back down to 19,000 for the sellers and 18.5 for one buyer. It's almost less than 18,000 for the buyers. So some unexpected volatility here in advanced moon materials, in both the carbonites and the metamaterials, or carbides and the metamaterials. Interesting, completely not what I expected. Very interesting to see. The thing is that we always do seem to launch off of 1 year low point. So it's very noticeable, actually, full of potential, but there is that risk, of course, that something like this happens, right? Even buying here at the 19.2k, looking at where the buyers are now, is not the right choice either. Very difficult. I think you need to be very intense with your market trading if you want to take advantage of this situation, but it's definitely possible as well. We still have some other advanced materials to look into. Fermionic condensate is trying to recover, get back to the 90k. Does so for the sellers, but on a lack of supply. So it does show, I think, that any new supply is going to bring us back to a less than average price. Ferrogel went to 1 year low point, a bit of recovery, but stays well away from its average. Fullerite is going away from the 1000 disc average, so again also below average. That's a more uniform situation, right? Hypersynaptic fibers average 12,000 disc, pretty stable first 5-6 months. Bit of speculation through the summer, that's like blackout related probably, but now we're back to a less than average price. Nanotransistors, now this is unexpected as well. Super strong summer, 6,000 disc on a complete lack of supply. In November, supply comes back, we're back on the normal 5,000 disc range, and now all of a sudden back to 6,000 for the sellers, 5,600 for the buyers. So very volatile, very interesting, completely unexpected here, but we're back at the 6,000 disc for the sellers of nanotransistors. Phenolic composites doing a bit better than most of the others, staying above 2,000 disc. 2,137 for the sellers, a bit below 2,000 for the buyers, but managing to maintain an average price. And then finally we've got ceramic fibers that also went to a low point, is recovering, but is still below average. So a bit more of a uniform, less speculative action on the other metamaterials, advanced moon materials, but there's definitely some weird stuff happening here as well. For instance, in the nanotransistor market, there is potential there, but you need more time looking at the market, keeping an eye on all of this stuff, I think, to actually make ISK out of it than I personally have available. Next up, the Tech 2 ships coming in at 37.35. Well, let's say 37.40. That way we can do a 40 on almost all the segments. Makes it nice and uniform. Let's start as always here with the Aries, which it's an interceptor, but it still has its uses, if I'm not mistaken, because it's still interdicted or immune to interdiction. Yeah. So here I think that is a very good barometer for the average situation in the Tech 2 market. It has uses. You'll lose some of these to like smart bombs and things like that from time to time, but it's not really something that a huge fleet is going to, or a meta for null-sec fleets doctrines, I don't think. And so it's less likely that you get massive buying and massive losing of these ships as well. And so here we can see that we're slowly going back down to the 25 million below average range. 25 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. That means that we are oversupplied basically at the moment. That's the general vibe. There's exceptions, of course. There's more speculation on stealth bombers, on the what are they, logistics cruisers as well, where you can take advantage of that. But for the general feel, I think stuff like the Aries is important. The Basilisk has recovered after reaching a 1 year low point of 180 million, back to its average range. 239 million in fact for the sellers, 214 for the buyers, and the average is right there. Decent supply, basically nice margin between sellers and buyers, but nothing too unreasonable. The Cerberus went to a 1-year low point. This is a speculation that you can work on from time to time. So you could have probably bought these here in October for around 200 million ISK, try to sell them for 280. But look at the response here, back down to 205 million for the sellers. No buyers anymore, 190 here. This is this supply. You can see that the volumes are above average for like a lot of these days. So this is something that can happen. I think lots of buying here caused the price spike up to 280. Incredible opportunity, of course, for this trade to happen, but keep this general oversupply situation in mind. That means that these will never last very long. That gap has been plugged by a massive amount of Cerberus that has come in the last couple of days, crashing the price back to that low point of around 200 million ISK. That can happen in this situation. The Crow is another interceptor. You can see that same trend here, landing at 27.5 million. I think it's a bit more popular because it got missiles. So there is some more combat utility, I think, than the Ares. 28 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. You can see again, look at the numbers here, 30s, 20s, lots of supply, not enough demand. And so these prices are clearly below average. For the longer term, it makes sense to try and buy on low points, in my opinion. Then the Eagle is new to the mix because it should take over the is it the Munin? Yeah, the Munin is back in here. No, I removed, well, I don't know. It was a suggestion, I think, because it is in the meta for Nullsec. Now, generally, I haven't really seen that many moves on this anymore because we like the big wars where everything is put on the line at the moment. And as a result, you know, they can manage basically their doctrines very well with their own production. Eagle is selling for 235 million. Buyers coming in at 188. Again, look at that wide margin between sellers and buyers, showing a bit of a lack of demand in general in the Tech 2 ship market. That gives rise to stuff like this. Again, the Guardian, low point of 200 million, could have probably bought them below that. High point of 250, but it never lasts very long. We're back to that less than average price. 210 million for the sellers, 180 for the buyers. Yeah, if you could buy for 180 and sell for 250, that is not bad, of course. Definitely don't go crazy with the volumes on these trades though, because that's very difficult to realize. Next up, we have the Heretics. We'll keep an eye on the interdictors and, well, with good reason here. Yet another 1-year low point. Less than 60 million for the sellers and 50 million for the buyers. This has to turn around at some point, but for most of the year you've been able to buy them for like 60 million ISK. Now you can buy them for 50 million ISK. So this is again that warning. Don't put all your ISK on a first low point. Always make sure that you've got some ammo left for another opportunity. Heretics at 50 million, that does seem pretty low. The Hound back up to 30 million ISK. You guys may know that I have made all of my stealth bombers trades, bought them for 22 and 21 million, sold them for just below 30 million ISK. Love the stealth bombers for that. Still at 30 million for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. And so, yeah, I fully took advantage of basically this dip here and then this increase in price here. With 5 of them in each, I think was the number. So nothing crazy, but definitely something that's reliably doable if you keep not even that close an eye on the market. Ishtar next, staying at 230 or just above that, not bad. 237 for the sellers, 213 for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin here. Strong PvE platform, of course, also strong PvP platform. I think it has its uses in Nullsec as well, so this one is actually doing very well in its price. Then we get the Manticore, another stealth bomber. Again, that low point here, bought them for 22 million, sold them for just shy of 30 million. It's still worth 29.7 million. Buyers are slowly going down to 23.5 million as well. The Munin is the one that was nerfed because it was a bit too overpowered and too popular. Down to 212 for the sellers and 180 for the buyers. That's basically the price that you pay when CCP decides to nerf the Doctrine ship here. Should you speculate on this recovering? That feels quite a bit more risky, of course. Next up here we get the Nemesis, and that means that I was very lucky to manage the trade, which is also the reason why I only bought 5 stealth bombers of each when I saw this dip here at 22 million and tried to sell just shy of 30 million to give me the best opportunity to actually manage the trade. I could have been a bit more aggressive because we could have tried to sell above 30 million here on that peak as well, but we are generally speaking oversupplied, so you gotta be a bit aggressive if you want to make the trade. And this is what happens when over speculation happens. We get too much supply, and now all of a sudden we're talking less than 21 million for the sellers, 18.2 million for the buyers. This is quite nuts. Worth it in my opinion. Try to buy as close to 80 million as possible, but again, don't try to buy 100 Nemesis at that range. But if you want to buy just a couple, wait for the volatility to come back here for the sellers to decide we're not producing this ship. Why the hell would we do that when we can try to make manticores with similar resources and try to sell them for close to 30 million ISK, and then we will see a recovery here, and you can now jump in close to 18 million ISK. That is crazy low for a stealth bomber. The potential is definitely there here. Man, that would be nice. I think I'm gonna try it if I find the time, because that would mean that I could get another trade going here. Absolutely worth it. Oneros went to 230, so here we get that same speculative or that same volatility that does exist, mostly as far as I can tell, in the stealth bombers and the logistics cruisers, because well, they're flown, they're used. Bombers bar, if you wanna cloaky stuff, get stealth bombers. If you want to do fleet stuff, even medium and small size, then logistics cruisers are used, and they're often primary, often lost as well. So as a result, these have that volatility in them, but it doesn't last long in the general Tech 2 market at the moment. Back down to 212 for the Oneros, still 180 for the buyers. Yep, there's no reason for them to budge. They're still trying to just snag up the good deals in these markets. Purifiers managed to get back to 30 million ISK here again. I basically wrote this increase here. Bought for 22, sold for just shy of 30, 31 million for the sellers, 26.7 for the buyers. Then the Saber, another interdictor, doing a bit better than the Heretic, 71 for the sellers, but 57 million for the buyers. Also quite a bit of pressure, of course. Then we get the Scimitar down to 1 year low point. Well, this is interesting as well. You could try one. Selling for 189, buyers are at 145. Let's try and show that on the chart. Yeah, then you gotta go all the way down here. Lack of demand. Again, definitely a trade that you could risk. Try to buy one Scimitar for like 150 and then wait for this to come back towards the 200 range. You get a massive sale potentially. If you try to do that with 10 of them, you're gonna end up holding the bag, unfortunately. Stiletto, very flat below 30 million ISK, so here 29 million for the sellers, 26.5 for the buyers. Narrow margin here for the Stiletto, doing decently well. So yeah, the Tech 2 ship market, it has the necessary volatility to successfully do trades. I think I showed that to you guys with my stealth bomber trade, but the general trend is still oversupplied, so you gotta time your sale. That's more important than timing your buy at the moment, your purchase. So keep that in mind if you want to risk it. Next up, the Tech 3 market coming in at 48 minutes. Like that, and let's see what the trends are like here. That is not good news, but it's exactly what I was afraid of. Here is the Confessor continuing to go down. Last week we were at 32.5 million. Now sellers are back up to 34 million. Okay, but buyers are down to 26 million, and despite that we still have 20, 30, 16 of them here. The average prices has gone down towards 30 million. You can definitely buy super cheap Confessors at the moment. This is basically what I was afraid of. Couple months of oversupply, and eventually the buyers just go down in price. This is where we can grab Confessors for a very cheap price. It's basically longer term than the Tech 2 ships, because we do need this oversupply situation to turn around I think, before we can reliably take a profit here, but this is also much more likely to happen on any Nozick action. Confessors, Hecates, Zwepel, no, not Zwe well, even Zwepels and Jackdaws are used a lot all of a sudden in bigger conflicts, so this is an opportunity to grab some very cheap Confessors right now on the market. Yeah, more supply. Look at this. You can see here the volumes have increased, prices have gone down. This is oversupply that has shown up in the last couple of months, creating this opportunity right now. The Hecate shows some volatility. That's part and of all of this as well. If we go to 1 year low points, you can sometimes get big purchases by alliances. They say, all right, you know, a Hecate fleet at this price, that's not so bad. So we jumped back up to 45 million ISK, 38 million for the buyers. They've been forced up as well, but look at the response in the last 2 days. 129, 194, 50, 50, 30, 50. That's so much. This is going to crash this price back down very quickly as well. And that's the trades that you can risk, of course. And right now in the Confessor, it's almost a no-brainer to try and buy these at these buy orders. But timing is very difficult. For me personally, if I would be purchasing and investing in these tactical destroyers, I would have a longer horizon. I would definitely focus on buying at the right time. And then, well, if a sale like that, I mean, I think by next week we'll see us back down to a less than average price. That's a lot more risky, a lot more tricky to time, when I think you can more reliably sell them at high points on some actual Nozick action. Next up, we've got the Jackdaw slowly going back to 40 million ISK, 41 for the sellers and 36 for the buyers. Yeah, the picture is no longer uniform here, but what is very noticeable here is that in the last 24 hours, because of that, 34, 30, 55, 30, another 36 as the latest order. Competition is very high in the sellers whenever the price goes back towards that, even if it's just average range. And then finally we've got the Zwepel that is doing the exact opposite, continuing to go down substantially. 34 million for the sellers and 29 million for the buyers. Just like the Confessor, the Zwepel, you can grab them below 30 million ISK on the buy orders. The opportunity is here. You can speculate on it on a spike like the Hecate when they reach that low point for a substantial amount of time and when supply keeps coming in, which, let's take a quick look at that for this Zwepel in the last 24 hours. It's still happening, still 18, 9, down here we get another 22, another 27, another 19. Yeah, and on the Confessor it's the exact same thing. We still have 20, 30, another 16 coming in, despite the fact that it is now, am I correct on that? No, almost the cheapest tactical destroyer. This oversupply situation is causing that volatility, that uncertainty. I would be a buyer right now at the right time, speculating on these spikes to keep happening. It is entirely possible, but I think it's basically dependent on a purchase from a big Nozick alliance and a big investment there. All right, we're gonna grab ourselves a Hecate fleet here, and those gaps get filled very quickly, so be careful again not to catch the falling knives, because you never know when the purchasing is just gonna stop at that point as well. For the cruisers, we had a bit of a recovery across the board back to average prices. It is not too lost here, from 160 back down to 150 for the Legion, 133 for the buyers, and again half a page with 34, 31. It doesn't take that much to be oversupplied in the tactical cruiser market, and I think that's still what's happening. The Loki managed to defend that 180 range for a bit, but right at the tail end you can see we are dropping off. 170 now for the sellers, 150 for the buyers, and yeah, last 24 hours we're down from 178 to 170 million on more selling. It's not even that big in the volumes, but it is basically oversupply that is still happening. And then we get the Proteus, same picture. 150 defended for about 10 days, and now we will see that we're down to 145, 129, and we don't even have that many ships, but people want to move product, and that means that they have to be more aggressive on the sellers, because we are I'm saying it a lot of times, but we are oversupplied. The Tengu managed to do a little bit better here, probably on more purchasing, stayed above 150. We're still above 150 at 157 for the sellers, 142 for the buyers. But what is very noticeable then, last 24 hours, yeah, that's almost 2 pages with 29, 14, another 15, another 50 here. Yeah, it's gonna crash that price back down very quickly. So more volatility, risky opportunities in the tech tree market right now, but in my opinion, oversupply is still dangerously dominating the situation. So I would be more interested in looking for charts like this and starting my investments. And then finally, we are going to reach the extra product. I'm gonna keep it below an hour, but we're gonna try 54.20. And it's a request from a viewer to look at the Rattlesnake, and the Praxis is also requesting the drones. I think we'll do that one next week because I might want to take a look at some more drones than what he has suggested. But these are basically alpha friendly, conduit capable ships that of course might be very interesting to look into. So we are going to start, I think, with the Praxis then. Let's do that one first. Basically your entry level, there's definitely fits that an alpha clone can use that will handle the emerging conduits, and look at that, he's absolutely right on this one. Praxis didn't really have a use, so this is also part of why I love the emerging conduits. It is solo friendly, goes up to 3 players if you want that optimal time, that optimal turnout, and still get the full reward for that. So it's great content for the high sec care bears basically, but it finally also gives battleships something to do as well outside of level 4 missions. So absolutely, in my opinion, a big hit from the invasions for the Triglavian sites here, the emerging conduits. And look at the response, of course, right? A Praxis that used to be worth like 60 million ISK because it didn't really have that big a use or anything like that, now jumps up to 130 million plus. Yeah, 133 for the sellers, 112 for the buyers, showing its popularity because of the emerging conduits. Doesn't take much. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to look at the show info. Can I close this without causing too much trouble? Yeah, requirements. That's all you need. So super alpha clone friendly, definitely your jump in ship for that type of content. If you're interested in it, very easy to get a strong shield tank, missiles and drones, and you are good to go. So that one makes a lot of sense. And then of course we have the Rattlesnake, the king in my opinion of the PvE, of course, because of the exact same reason. And yes, very noticeable here. Half a year ago going for around 450 million ISK, now selling for 875 million ISK, 810 for the buyers. Basically it's such a good platform for those emerging conduits, which are still making you a lot of ISK, of course, because those are now tied to the new Triglavian economy, the Triglavian production cycles, and so as a result super popular at the moment, and at a 1 year high point almost double the price from about a year ago. And I agree, this is because of the emerging conduits and the invasion PvE that demands a strong platform, as strong as possible when it comes to tank and damage output. And for high sec, of course, we don't have the capital options. We have the Orca potentially, but if you want some efficiency, I think stuff like the Rattlesnake is the best you can go for, and so now we are paying the premium because of that. Thank you very much for that suggestion, very interesting. Next week I'll look at some of the more popular drones when it comes to that, stuff like the Gecko, and see what the impact will have been there. But for now, that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.